So this is the next installment in my series on the foundations of Christianity, and I know that, like last time, it's been kind of a long time, maybe about a little over a month, um, and this is quite long overdue. I had a lot of schoolwork to take care of, and a lot of interruptions in my personal life, but I am back to finishing this series, and I want to finish it reasonably, because I think it's important to get out there. So if it's not fresh in your mind, what we already covered, I'll make sure to link the previous entries into the description of this video so you can get caught up. So let's just dive right in. In the last entry, if you're caught up and or if you remember, we've established hylomorphism, which is the idea that reality at its most fundamental level, at its most fundamental metaphysical core, is essentially dualistic, which is to say, it's essentially constitutive of a material element, that is, an underlying subject that accounts for individuation, and a formal element, which is to say, the determining principle whereby an individuated subject is distinguishable as this essence as opposed to that essence. The nature of a tree, for example, accounts for the formal element and the underlying subjectivity, which accounts for speaking of this or that tree individually, and this is a material element. We went on to explore that this distinction between matter and form bears relevance not only to getting at how this reality is intelligible, but to how this rational principle of nature is essential to the makeup of the Christian religion, which is the causa finalis, if you will, of this YouTube series. Now, the Latin form I just used, causa finalis, I think is a good way to introduce the theme for this video. The term is Latin, of course, for final cause, which is the Aristotelian term that basically means that for the sake of which a reality exists. This discipline that would ideally have this principle as its object is termed teleology. A lot of you are probably thinking of maybe Paley's teleological argument for God's existence. So don't roll your eyes just yet. This isn't really talking about design in the sense of a watchmaker, mechanically putting together a watch as if this is somehow analogous to how God had to have created biological mechanisms or anything like that, really. In the Aristotelian sense, what we're really getting at is that in nature, we see that things exhibit various tendencies that, given their specific natures, they will act toward ends or goals beyond their current static manner of existence. So, for example, take a glass. Now, glass obviously has a tendency to shatter. This tendency to shatter is the state of affairs that is not reducible to the state of, say, maybe a glass window. The nature of the glass, however, is such that it will, barring interferences, tend toward that specific outcome. Brittleness is not some arbitrary result of disconnected events following one another, as perhaps hume would have it. It is grounded in the essence of the glass itself, such that given a specific kind of interaction with it, it will inevitably, barring interferences, yield this outcome as opposed to another. Now, this principle is much more easily demonstrated, I think, when applied to living systems. It's completely unintelligible to speak of the eyes or the heart without reference to the causa finalis of sight or the pumping of blood throughout the body, respectively. Given the nature of the eye and the heart in relation to the nexus of the teleological systems that constitute the body, these functions are discernible realities that have their seat not reductively in the materiality of the eye or the heart, but eminently as derivative in their respective natures. The power of sight of itself is not reducible to any material component of the eye, but is that for the sake of which the eye is formed, and the way it is and operates according to a specific function. This function, however, since it transcends the materiality of the eye as components in the order of intelligibility, is in itself abstract, yet still existent within the formal as opposed to material structure of the eye itself. The eye, statically, is related to the power of sight not as to its material constitution, but to something aimed towards something perfectible, that which fundamentally makes the eye what it is. It is aimed toward that for the sake of which it exists, in other words. Thus, being, general, created being, is not reducible to a static collectivity of matter/form compositions, but is at its very core directed toward goals or ends, or even purposes that are ordered toward perfecting that for which they are perfectible. Now, if you want to draw a triangle correctly, I'll just use a geometrical example. That's kind of a common one that we would use in these kinds of conversations. Or more perfectly, you want to ensure that you are approximating 180 degrees as closely as you can, that your drawing is actually a three-sided polygon. Now, it's more or less perfect to the degree to which it conforms to its form, or nature, or essence. Now, essences are not static, but are intrinsically goal-directed toward the tendencies that complete or perfect those essences once actualized. And once actualized, they will be in conformity to what they are at their deepest, most innermost integrities. So that's the principle of perfectible participation and teleology. And as you can see, it's really grounded in reason. It is grounded in reason's application to the natural world at its metaphysical level. But I realize it's abstract. So let's do what the purpose of this series is designed to do and actually tie it to Christianity. Now, in Christianity, we see these two principles universalized, I would say. We know that perfectibility in teleology is ingredient in nature with respect to specific classes and particulars. But what of nature as such? Now, if individual beings are perfectible and tending toward perfection, then what would this look like as applicable to the whole of the universe, whilst maintaining the individuality of specific objects? Well, I submit to you that in Christianity, we see just this. For a core tenet of Christianity is the hypostatic union, which is God and man united absolutely under the one person of Christ. But what is man in this context? Man, which we will get into more later, is in a real sense a compendium or a microcosm of the entire universe, whereby the corporeal, the vegetative, the sensitive, and the rational, which constitute the universe in the broadest of categories, comes together in one substance, in one reality. Now this compendium, this microcosm, just as everything else in nature, is perfectible and teleological. Now, what would this microcosm, compendium of the universe, man, look like if he were maximally perfectible? Well, it would look a lot like the hypostatic union, Jesus Christ, to whom the rest of humanity can unite, and in whom the rest of the humanity can participate by virtue of their integration into his mystical body, the Church. Now we'll get into how all this stuff is plausible later on, but the important thing to recognize now is that these two principles, perfectible participation and teleology, are grounded in reason and are essential and central to the Christian framework, and they reach their fullest perfection only in this system of thought, since it accounts for how these principles can meet their universal application as regards to the whole of created being. So thank you for watching this video, and the next entry I promise will come much sooner. And in the next one, we're actually going to tackle natural theology. So we're actually going to establish the existence of God, get into the nature of God, and then we can go from there. So these last videos were establishing the first metaphysical principles that I think undergird certain key aspects of Christianity. But we can't get into Christianity itself, its own philosophical system, without establishing the existence of God. So we're going to do that next. So thank you for watching the video, and if you like the video, then like it, it's helpful, and I'll see you the next time. Thank you.